The house exploded into shocking pink under the cover of night. Laughter turned to silence as National Guard Humvees stormed the gravel driveway. The grumpy vet's secret was far darker than anyone imagined. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The sharp buzz of the spray cans lingered in their ears as the first pink light of dawn crept over Millbrook, casting a soft glow on Harold Benson's newly transformed house. From a distance, Jake, Mia, Lucas, and Emily huddled behind a hedge on Maple Street, their breaths shallow and quick, hearts pounding with a cocktail of thrill and fear. The house was a screaming beacon, out of place among the subdued hues of the quiet neighborhood, a gaudy shrine to their reckless prank. Jake's grin was wide, triumphant. The others shared nervous laughs, but beneath the surface, tension curled like smoke. They had crossed a line, but none of them had anticipated just how deeply they had unsettled the town's fragile peace. Harold Benson emerged from his front door, rigid and slow. The man was smaller than they expected, stooped as if the weight of years pressed on his shoulders. His eyes, sharp and dark beneath thick brows, scanned the house as if trying to comprehend some cruel joke. There was no fury, no shouting, only an expression carved from years of quiet suffering, raw and vulnerable. The bright pink paint had pierced something fragile inside him, something more than just his carefully guarded privacy. Jake's bravado wavered. He's gonna freak, huh? But the shock was nothing compared to what came next. The sudden, thunderous roar of engines shattered the morning calm. The teens froze, wide-eyed, as a convoy of olive-green Humvees rolled down the street with mechanical precision. Soldiers, faces stern and helmets gleaming, poured out, setting up a perimeter around Harold's property. Their movements were crisp, disciplined, more suited to a battlefield than a suburban street. Mia's voice trembled. This can't be real. Why are the National Guard here?" Lucas swallowed hard, eyes darting nervously. "No idea. This isn't just about paint anymore." For the first time, they saw Harold not as a grumpy recluse, but as a man enmeshed in a reality none of them understood, a reality that apparently demanded military attention. From behind the Humvees, a figure in uniform approached the house. The soldiers parted respectfully, almost reverently, revealing a middle-aged officer with a badge glinting in the morning sun. He spoke into a radio, then nodded toward Harold. The vet, despite his frailty, stood tall for the first time that morning. His eyes met the officer's with a quiet dignity that stilled the buzzing questions in the teens' minds. Jake's bravado dissolved into a knot of guilt. The reckless prank that had seemed so harmless suddenly felt like a blunder of monumental consequence. This wasn't about a cranky old man anymore. It was about something bigger, something they had stumbled into without a clue. Emily's whisper barely broke the tense silence. "What did we just do?" But no one had answers yet. All they knew was that the sleepy town of Millbrook had just woken up to a secret none of them were prepared for, and their joke had lit the fuse. The hum of radios, the crisp commands from soldiers, and Harold's quiet resolve hung heavy in the air, knitting a web of confusion and fear. The pink house wasn't just a prank anymore. It was a spotlight on a shadowed truth. And for the first time, the teens saw that beneath the surface of their small town, something far darker, far more serious was unfolding. Their summer of boredom had cracked open a door to a world none of them wanted to enter. The truth unraveled quickly, pulling the teens deeper into a reality they had barely glimpsed before. Harold Benson was not the eccentric recluse they'd assumed. He was a man forged by fire, scarred by battles no one in Millbrook could comprehend. When the local news finally trickled in, the story was as heavy as the oppressive silence that had settled over the town since that morning. Harold had served multiple tours in the military, decorated with honors that marked him as a hero. But the medals told only part of the story. Behind them lay a relentless war waged in his mind, the invisible enemy of PTSD that haunted his every waking moment. The classified mission he had recently returned from was a ghost in the town's collective awareness. No one knew what he'd endured, only that his work now centered on something sacred, training military service dogs. These animals were not just pets, they were partners in combat, sentinels against danger, life-saving comrades in chaos. His quiet home was a command post of sorts, a sanctuary for these dogs and the men and women who relied on them. Every detail was shrouded in secrecy. Even the National Guard's heavy presence had layers of meaning beyond the visible. The pink paint that had seemed like childish vandalism was interpreted in starkly different terms by the officials monitoring Harold's operation. To them, it was a breach, an unpredictable, alarming sign that could indicate a targeted threat, or worse. Their rapid deployment wasn't a simple reaction to a prank. It was a calculated, urgent move to secure a vulnerable asset. Harold's fragile psyche was a battlefield in itself, and the military feared any disturbance could trigger a dangerous spiral. As the news spread, the community's shock deepened into a collective reckoning. Millbrook was a town that cherished its quiet rhythms and unspoken loyalties, and Harold Benson had been a cornerstone of that trust. People who once saw only the curmudgeonly vet now saw a man battling demons they could neither see nor understand. His acts of kindness toward their pets became acts of courage in their eyes. The prank, once a source of laughter among the teens, transformed into an emblem of betrayal, an unforgivable wound to a man already bleeding beneath the surface. Jake felt the weight of this shift like a crushing tide. The initial thrill of the prank faded into a gnawing guilt that hollowed his chest. Words from Mia cut through his denial with surgical precision. "You didn't think about what he's been through. This isn't just about a silly prank. You broke something inside him." Her voice was steady, but beneath it lay a sorrow that mirrored his own regret. Jake's stubborn pride, once a shield against responsibility, began to crack. He recalled the way Harold had looked that morning, eyes distant, as if the bright pink house was a trigger, pulling him back to places Jake couldn't imagine. The images haunted him: Harold's quiet pain, the soldiers standing guard like sentinels around a fragile fortress, the sudden coldness in the town's whispers. Lucas and Emily remained silent, their youthful bravado replaced by a somber understanding. The prank had been a spark that ignited a blaze of consequences far beyond their reckoning. Their summer of boredom had ignited a storm of emotions: guilt, fear, and a dawning sense of responsibility. They stood on the edge of a harsh, new reality where innocence had been lost, where their actions echoed through the lives of others in unexpected and painful ways. Mia's words lingered between them, a silent verdict that demanded reckoning. They had to confront the damage done, not just to Harold's home, but to his soul. In that moment, the laughter died completely, replaced by the harsh clarity of rising pain and the heavy burden of understanding. The evening sun cast long shadows over the faded pink walls of Harold Benson's house, now softened by the early hues of dusk and the fresh strokes of white paint. The paintbrushes moved steadily, the rhythm of their work unspoken, but understood. A silent pact of redemption weaving itself between four teenagers and a man whose life had been scarred by battles far deeper than any visible wound. The house, once a jarring splash of neon defiance, was becoming something else, a symbol of respect reclaimed, of a community's fragile but earnest attempt to mend what had been broken. When Jake, Mia, Lucas, and Emily had first approached the guarded property, uncertainty twisted their stomachs. The looming presence of soldiers, the whispered warnings from neighbors, and the echo of Harold's quiet resilience weighed on them. Yet it was Harold's own response that surprised them most. There was no fury in his eyes, no bitterness lacing his words. Instead, he offered them something far more powerful: trust, and a story that unfolded like a raw wound laid bare. Harold spoke of distant deserts and rain-soaked trenches, of brothers lost in firefights that never made headlines, and of the invisible war that followed, nightmares that clawed relentlessly, stealing peace in broad daylight. He spoke too of the dogs, silent warriors who never judged, who felt pain without words, and who, through their unwavering loyalty, had become his anchor. Each tale was a thread connecting past to present, weaving understanding where once had been ignorance. The teens listened with a gravity that eclipsed their youthful arrogance. Every word from Harold cracked open a door inside them, revealing the weight of sacrifice and the complexity of healing. As the paint darkened the once defiant pink, their brushes became instruments of empathy, their hands steady with purpose. Rebuilding trust was no simple feat. It rippled outward. Neighbors watched, skepticism giving way to quiet nods as the story unfolded. The local news, which had once sensationalized the prank, shifted tone, spotlighting the transformation from careless jest to heartfelt contrition. The narrative grew richer, a lesson in humility, in recognizing that respect demanded more than surface gestures. It required seeing the unseen wounds beneath the bravado. Jake's transformation was most striking. Once brash and reckless, he found his voice tempered by remorse and newfound wisdom. At a packed town meeting, under the dim glare of fluorescent lights, he stood firm. "I was wrong. We were wrong," he confessed, eyes steady on the sea of familiar faces. "We didn't see the man behind the walls. This taught me that respect isn't just what you say, it's what you understand and what you do." His words were met with a mixture of relief and quiet approval, a young man claiming responsibility and redefining his place within the community. The pink paint faded, worn away by rain and time, but the story endured, etched into the town's collective memory. Harold's house stood white again, restored but transformed, crowned by a modest plaque on the porch that read, "To all who serve and suffer in silence, thank you." It was a simple tribute, yet profound in its recognition of the invisible battles fought daily by veterans like Harold. For the teens, the experience became a crucible of growth. They learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear or the bravado of pranks, but the willingness to own mistakes and fight for justice through humility and action. In the quiet solidarity of repainting walls and opening hearts, they discovered a victory far greater than any prank could deliver: the triumph of respect, earned, shared, and honored.